We are coming up on the 55th anniversary of Apollo 13. Gene Kranz, of course, got so much of the glory because of the movie, which you were a consultant, but it was your flight team that really came in and started to clean up the mess that it became very early, or at least do the best you could. Tell me what it was like in the mission control room at that time.
Well, it was, we had been out to the moon already several times, so we didn't take our eye off the ball at all, but we thought things were going pretty good. We were feeling pretty good about getting to the moon and back, and landing even, because we landed on 11 and 12. Um, when this happened, it's funny, I was on duty in the control center, and I turned over to Gene Kranz. I tell him to this day that I turned him over a perfectly good spacecraft and he blew it up. And he just laughs. But actually, it was comfortable enough. I went out to play a softball game. And this was before cell phones, so they tracked me down through my wife. She knew where I was. And came and got me and said, "You better get back to the control center because we've had a problem." And I walked into the control center. There were a few more people in the room, but it was not panicky. I still had on my baseball or softball sweats, and I walked in, and Glenn Lunny was another flight director, was coming in to relieve Gene Kranz, and I looked at him, and he kind of looked at me in a way I knew we had a serious problem. So I plugged in headset and just sat and listened for a little bit. And that was about the time that Gene's shift was ending and Glenn was coming on. And it got a lot, that's why there were so many people in the room, because we overlapped an hour. When, uh, when we realized how bad it was, that we were going to lose all the O2 in the service module, and that meant we were going to lose our power, all we would have left are little batteries in the command module for every entry. So we had to do something in a hurry. So we started powering down the CSM, the command module, the surface module, which had never been done in space. That was probably the toughest thing that we faced, because that had never been started in space. Once you start one of those things on the ground, you never turn them off. And then I noticed that they had already reworked the flight director schedule, and I was going to follow Glenn for some reason, which to this day I don't know why. I was in front of Milt Wendler, who was the fourth flight director. So I said, well, I better get home and try to get some sleep. So I ran to the house. It was only a half mile away, and tried to sleep and couldn't. Got up and took a shower, went back, got dressed properly, and went back to the control center. And it was not chaotic, but we had never faced anything that massive, that far from home. We were roughly 200,000 miles from the Earth, with about 40,000 more to go to the moon. Thank goodness we still had the lunar module. If it had happened after the lunar module had separated and gone down and landed, it was over. We didn't have enough propulsion to get home.
I know you must have told this story hundreds, thousands of times over the years. What are the things that kind of get lost to history that are an important part of the story?
Well, I think it was, quite often the astronauts in mission control get all of the coverage, get all the ink, because we talk to each other, we know each other, we're friends. So, but the massive is like an iceberg. That's just a little piece sticking up here at the top. All of this massive support all over the country, even had offers for help from other countries. But our contractor workforce, our universities, our test facilities all over the country swung into action, and they were quite often what we were telling the crew to do was a result of that kind of support. It wasn't all generated in our brains in the control center. And so I always liked, and I know Neil Armstrong felt this way, there were, at the peak of the program, 400,000 people working on this thing. and it was a great team effort. It was not a few characters, even Gene Kranz. Um, and although Gene did, he wore the vest, and I think that got him probably more attention than anybody. And he did play a key role in. I was to do the landing on Apollo 13, and when we knew that wasn't going to happen, we had 4 teams working that flight. We just took Kranz's team off and said, "Go figure out what you got, what we got." And then the other 3 of us went in a normal rotation. And then Gene came back at the end because he had worked out the checklist to read to the crew to get the whole command module back up.
Right.
So it was a team effort. And man, when you turn that American team that below the waterline on, you got a lot of help.
You were flight director through Gemini and through Apollo.
No, I was a flight controller.
Flight controller in Gemini.
And then I became, after the fire, I became a flight director.
Flight director through Apollo. Did that include Skylab? Did that include ASTP, or was that?
I was getting ready to do that, and I was called to Washington. And so I didn't work Skylab or ASTP.
The reason I ask is because everybody has a favorite memory or something about what they've done. I'm wondering if all the Apollo missions that you were a flight director for, if you had one that was absolutely a favorite for you.
That's hard to answer. It's a little bit like who's your favorite kid, because they were all, I can remember in great detail, almost all of them. The one that probably impressed me the most, and this may surprise you, was Apollo 8, when we actually put humans in orbit around this distant body. And when they saw that first Earthrise and got the picture that Anders took, it just made it complete. And I think at that point we all felt we're going to do this. We're going to land on the moon. And we already had the hardware right behind to start that process.
It's been more than 50 years, of course, since Apollo 8, and more than 50 years since Apollo 17 landed on the moon for the last time that humans were there. NASA is getting ready to fly Artemis around the moon, Artemis 2, early next year. I think right now, with things so volatile politically and with a lot of questions technically, a lot of people are wondering, okay, so where do we go from here? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think Artemis 2, Godspeed. I hope they get on it early in the year. Earlier the better. But I understand it's no later than April.
Right.
We need that signal that we can get people back to the moon. Technology is better, different kind of approach. They got enough performance to go to the poles, orbit the poles on 2, and hopefully land on 3. And so I think it's a very important mission. I think the hardware is getting ready. It's being stacked right now, as you probably know better than I do, right there at Kennedy, and it's getting ready to go. And I think the ground support team is in great shape, not only at the Cape, but JSC, the mission control people. Let's go do it.
There is so much talk, though, about the new administration being more excited about Mars.
Yeah.
And are you concerned that might divert or will divert from whatever happens with Artemis?
It could, although we're nowhere near ready to go to Mars. Nowhere near.
And how does Artemis help perhaps a future Mars mission?
I think it helps a lot, because that's where we're going to learn how to establish a permanent habitat, much like Antarctica, where you don't have to have sortie missions flying up to do tasks and coming immediately back home. That's where we're going to learn how to handle Mars, I think, and how to build habitat, how to sustain life for a long period on a place that's pretty hostile.
Do you think there's a political will to keep going the current course with Artemis and
I,
commit to the moon?
I
Recommit?
think all of those states with space assets of some kind, there's no doubt they're all very, very much for it. It's the, pardon me, it's the outfits that don't have much that the states, you're a little worried about them. But Artemis has survived change of administrations. This one has been a little more volatile, as you say, and hopefully it'll make it through. And got my fingers crossed.
We'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Peter.
All right, we're done.
Very nice. Thank you, guys.
Hang on, don't go yet. You're still clipped.
Oh, I'm clipped.
Let's